Okay, Angular Orange here, giving you a tutorial on data binding. What we're going to do in this tutorial is we're going to create a single page application, and we're going to have an index.html which has a background color of turquoise, and we're going to create a root component called app component which has a Dodger blue color, and in that component we'll have a child which is a company component, and that company component will have a text field in its template, and when you type in a company name, what will happen is the value in the input field would be bound to the component backing object, which is a TypeScript object class, and then when the value of that backing instance attribute changes, then we're going to have it bound to the template, and that value will show up in orange, and you'll see angularorange.io on the template in orange. So type in any company name you want, but we'll be going through this example this way. So let's talk about what we want to do. Okay, we want to do is we want to create a project in WebStorm called Binding Two-Way. We're going to use Angular CLI to do that. We're going to go to the command line and generate some components. Okay, so app component is the root component. It'll be generated automatically. We're going to go and style that and create a blue background. And then you'll have a company component that has a public attribute called company name. We're going to use this template and style it with a green background and put an input field in the template. We're going to use two-way binding directive that ensures that whatever the user types into the field gets set to the backing object, sets the company name value, and will display in the view. Okay, so basically we can generate the components in the app component and the company component in the components directory using the Angular CLI command lines ng generate. And then we're going to use this square bracket left paren ng model to make sure that we have two-way binding directive in the company component template. And then we're also going to use this expression to immediately display the company name typed in by the user. So the interpolation double curly bracket will use that as well. So in our template, what we'll do is we'll show this is the company component. We'll have an input field, enter the company name placeholder, and then we'll have this ng model two-way binding directive, square bracket, left bracket, left paren, whatever, and that's called a two-way binding directive, and we'll bind that to company name in the back end. And all that means is that when you type in an input field name, it'll set the company name attribute of the instance of the TypeScript object in the backing object, and then and if you change the company name in the backing object, then that would automatically change the input field as well. And we don't go and show that. We just render it on the front end using the double curly bracket interpolation directive. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so let's look at the code. Okay, so here is the application, and I already have the application up and running. I have run. I went to the binding two-way project after I created it and did the ng serve. It actually compiled the application and generated and bundled and everything else like that. It produced these files. They're in a temporary directory. If I do an ng build, it'll put them in a disk directory, but right now it's being built, and WebSockets is now rendering the front end. So the front end is looking like this. Okay, so here, let me refresh. And I did something else really interesting here as well, and I'll show you the code in a minute. Okay, so notice that that I typed in a new company name, and the value of the company name is showing up in the template. So let's take a look at what the application code looks like, and let's go through it in fine detail. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter presentation mode, and I'm going to look at the application. Okay, once again we have an index, a main.ts driver, and a style sheet. So the index still just shows an app-root custom tag, which is the selector of my root component for my Angular application. The style says the background, it's turquoise. And my main.ts driver looks like this. What we do is we import enable prod mode, just in case we're running in production mode. That will enable prod mode will turn off the assertions that are used in dev mode, but we're still in dev here. We also import a platform browser dynamic from Angular, and that's used to bootstrap my app module here. App module is my custom application module. It's located in this file here, and so now I know I can go to take a look at my app module and see what that looks like. Okay, when I look at the annotation ng module and I look at all the things that are defined, I could see right away my root component is app component. Okay, and I also when I look at my declarations, it looks like I got two custom components, app component and company component, which means to me that company component must be a child of app component, because my application is a single page application. It's a tree of components. Unless my app component template references component template as a child, then the component template's really not used. So it must be used. Okay, and I import forms modules here, forms module here, because I might be using a form. And that's really all I need to know in this module. Is my custom app module is booting a root component, which could possibly have a child component, and is a forms module, and it could possibly be using forms. Okay, so I go to components and I see there's two components, application component and child component. When I look at the application component, I notice that this selector is app root. There's an external template, external style sheet. My class is app component. It's exported, simple as can be. When I look, okay, so first I look at my template and I notice that there's a company search tag. So I have a company component, and unless that thing has a selector called company search, I don't know what that component company search is yet. So I go here really quick. I see that this selector is company search. So yes, this company component is a child of app component. And notice I put the custom tag or the selector in my app component template, so that defines the parent-child relationship between app component and company component. Now, since all this does is show that this is an app component, and then here the markup and the functionality for the company component goes here. Let me just quickly take a look at my style sheet. My div background color is Dodger blue. My H1 background color is Dodger blue. So I think we got this component covered. It's very simple. It's a root component, but it's very simple. It's just colored and displays some text. And the text displayed is really hard-coded into the template. Okay, so now let's take a look at the company component. Well, this is interesting. I have a company component. It has it imports component for the annotation component. I have a selector, an external template, an external style sheet, and then I have an exported class company component. I have a company string in there, which I define initially to be something like SOA Consulting Services. And what I do is the string is going to be undefined initially until the set timeout runs and defines the company name after 2,000 milliseconds. So basically, this has to be called. This function, this definition will be called. The event loop will pull it up and execute it on the stack after 2 seconds. So what you'll see, and I didn't mean to make things complicated, but the bottom line is there's interesting aspects of this particular coding example. One is company name is defined here first. Then it goes to the front end of the template, and the field gets updated. The input field gets updated. Then I change that value in the input field, and it comes back and changes this company name in the component. And once that changes, the change detection and the directive on the company component template renders the new name below the text field. So there's a lot of things going on here which are kind of interesting. It's a very simple example, but at the same time, it's a little bit intriguing. So when I first render the value of the attribute in the instance of the TypeScript class gets defined, and then what happens is I'm using the two-way bind operator to sync up the value that's being shown here in the input field with the value in the object. So I just seen it go one way from the backing object to the template. Now I'm going to see it go another way, and it's already going that way. If I do Angular, these values that I'm typing in are already going to the backing attribute value object and coming back to the front end template. And then I do orange.io, and so what's happened here is this value went to the instance of the TypeScript class, set the value of company name, and then the directive here said show whatever the value of the company name in the object instance backing this template is here using that interpolation operator. So it's an interesting example, and probably the most interesting thing about it is it's very responsive. As I'm typing the values in this attribute of the instance of the company component are dynamically changing, and then we're seeing that being rendered on the front end as you're typing. So it's very interesting. Okay, so that is a two-way binding, a code example using the left square, left paren syntax directive. And we also use, in binding this input field to an attribute in the component. And we also use a directive, an interpolation directive, or double curly bracket directive to render the backing value of the instance attribute to the template. And we show that in orange. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show, and notice the responsiveness you get from Angular. It's very, very impressive.